The Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling is shaking things up in former President Trump's New York criminal case. As we just heard, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg says he will not oppose Trump's motion to delay his sentencing. Joining me now to assess the implications of the High Court's presidential immunity ruling is former Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill. Former Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Attorney General, breaking earlier today, Donald Trump's sentencing for hush money, the so-called hush money case, likely to be delayed for at least 2 weeks. This in light of the Supreme Court's historic ruling yesterday. Are we already seeing the reverberations of this ruling? What might this mean for that case in New York?
Well, the case in New York, in my estimation, was always shaky anyway in terms of the initial effort by the Manhattan DA. What we're seeing now is this thrust of a new immunity situation that the Supreme Court has determined that the President of the United States enjoys immunity for conduct that's official in its nature. So I think the Trump team is rightfully so requesting time to consider what that new Supreme Court holding does potentially for the case in New York, setting aside some time to determine if any of the acts or conduct in which the allegations that were brought forth could be considered official and therefore qualify as immune for prosecution.
And to your point, the ruling stated that a president cannot be prosecuted for their actions within their constitutional authority, extending that immunity to the outer perimeter of official duties. What does this ultimately mean for, I guess, the biggest event in question, which was that January 6th speech?
Well, I think what has to happen now is it's not all clear sailing. The case needs to go back for further evaluation or analysis as to what is official conduct. The immunity is very clear that if it's a constitutional authority or official conduct, the president is immune from any prosecution. So someone may have to determine what is the definition of official conduct. And for the executive branch or any government official, that can sometimes be tricky because there are clearly things that the president does that are absolutely official conduct, executing, signing a bill into law, things that only he can do. But there's other things that are sort of interesting. I mean, the president of the United States is always the president. You don't shut down at 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock. It's a round-the-clock position. Even when you're engaged in political activity, that can be considered official capacity. So it makes for a very interesting analysis in terms of what's going to be considered official conduct versus unofficial conduct. It certainly doesn't clear anyone from obvious crimes that could occur, but for crimes that need to be evaluated, or in the case that we're facing now in New York and some of the other prosecutions made up, when they are simply allegations that are being made up for political purposes, it does put some extra oomph into the analysis to make a determination of whether or not it's official conduct.
It's really an excellent analysis on the matter. And, you know, the Supreme Court, although this particular ruling is taking the limelight right now, they were extremely busy over the past week or so. On Friday, they overruled the Chevron doctrine, which required courts to defer to federal agencies' interpretations of ambiguous statutes. How has Chevron enabled federal agencies to overreach Congress's intent?
Well, the original Chevron doctrine has been one of the worst things that could have happened in American jurisprudence because it empowered or emboldened federal agencies to interpret their own rules without government or without court intervention. And it's been a real sticking point for the last 40 plus years. Alleviating the Chevron rule from the system is one of the best things that could happen in terms of being able to control that beast that we call a bureaucracy. It means that there can be court intervention to determine what the appropriate rules are, and it requires Congress to do its job. We don't want Congress to be overladen with minutia, which is part of what the original Chevron decision was all about, making sure that Congress didn't have to be involved in in every little nook and cranny of legislative process. But it has gone so far that the unelected bureaucrats have been controlling the shots for a number of years. And so now we get some parity back into the system to make sure that we don't have bureaucracies running amok. It's also has impacted the states. Even though the Chevron decision was a federal case, the implication was that state agencies were able to provide their own direction short of court intervention. So it's a very solid ruling for those of us who believe in freedom.
Former Indiana AG Curtis Hill, really appreciate your analysis.
Thank you very much.